Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. For the second time in 2 days, a team has confirmed their roster for the CDL 2024. This time it's the Los Angeles Thieves. Let's not forget, none of their players that were on the team last season and won the World Championship in 2022 remain on this roster. A brand new team from top to bottom. It's got its pros, it's got its cons as far as I'm concerned. One benefit though is the potential of the OpTic curse. Ghosty joins this team. Many people very excited about that. Can renew the OpTic versus Thieves rivalry as well to some degree. Will it be enough though to get good results this season? That remains to be seen. Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Now, like, Doug isn't joining Thieves, just in case I managed to bait you with that intro. I doubt it, but, you know, just in case. Anyway, before we get into the Thieves stuff, quickly from Rocker, we saw back in, like, pretty much after Champs that Brian Saint was released as their... I think Brian Saint was technically their head coach before, and then when LAT kind of retired, he came in as a coach, so he's now going to be the head coach. And there's an argument that last season, when they changed around how they were working that, because I think LAT at some point last season took more of a charge of controlling the respawn stuff, Brian Saint took more of a control of the search and destroy stuff, and it seemed to help them a little bit in the latter half of the season. So, you know, LAT officially head coach yet again for the new year. As I've said before, I do wonder maybe after this season, after next season, who knows how long Accuracy stays around for, but at some point Accuracy's got to retire, and maybe he'll want to do something else that isn't coaching, but, you know, I can definitely see that possibility in the future. So depending on how that season goes, definitely one to watch out for. But we knew that today was going to be the LA Thieves announcement, according to this from Check About last night. He was baiting a little bit that maybe the team was going to be slightly different to what we were expecting, but it turned out it's the roster we thought. Now, I will say that this announcement video was incredibly well done here by the Thieves. I do like the announcement videos when they're done well, because when people know, you know, what the rosters are going to be, it always can be a little bit underwhelming if the announcement video is made, let's say how the Rock one was made, where the players don't really want to do it and the acting isn't necessarily so good. Thieves did a good job with this one, right? So they get JHP comes along, Afro then comes in, and they ask him a question, and he says, look, I like the big booty Latinas, and Josh is like, get him sign the contract right now, so he puts the pen to paper. That's pretty funny. JoeDeceives comes along as well also, and he gets the deal done. And then you know, so Cammy comes in and he reveals the beans on toast, right? And then Shane has to come up to analyze if the beans on toast are any good. And it's pretty funny stuff. I don't think there's any cheese on this though, is there? I mean, surely you got to get a bit of you know, cheddar cheese on that or something like that. Anyway, just you know, so no cheese, a bit questionable as far as I'm concerned, but whatever. Well done video. And you know, at the end of it all, then Ghosty kind of comes out of the shadows, I suppose, and announces himself onto the roster. So very well done by the Thieves boys in general, and that is going to be your new roster for on the Thieves for the new season. Given all the pieces in play, I've got to say this is pretty similar to what I would have done. I'd have got Afro for sure, I'd have got Ghosty for sure if I could. Outside of that, I think there are some questions to be raised, and I suppose we'll dive into them, right? So Afro, JoeDeceives on the SMGs. JoeDeceives is a very interesting player to sign here because there are other candidates, you know, Nero, Vivid, okay, maybe he's going to, well, he has now joined officially Minnesota, but, you know, you'd have thought Thieves, if they moved quickly, could have got something done. Now, of course, the big, not exactly elephant in the room because we've known it for some time, but the fact that all of the previous players are gone now, right? Kenny's gone to OpTic, Drazah's gone to FaZe, Envoy's gone to Toronto, Octane's retired, like that entire World Championship winning team is gone, the salaries are getting cut significantly, and we remember that Nadeshot said not that long ago now that their plan was to kind of build around, you know, young superstar, potential superstar players to help start their career at Thieves, and I thought that meant they would bring on at least one rookie, but actually there are no rookies here. Now, there are two players that are close to being rookies, in Ghosty and JoeDeceives that had their rookie season this last season, but they do have a little bit more experience than I was maybe expecting. I thought they might get someone brand new. I thought they might get aBeZy, to be honest. It looks like he's going to go to the Seattle Surge. I don't, you know, massively dislike the way that they've gone here, but I definitely think that there are some questions they will have to resolve. But I do think the upside of this team is actually very strong, and I think of all the teams in that kind of 5th through 8th range, at least at the start of the season, this will be the team that I'm most keeping an eye on, because I actually really like the way that at least part of this team has been constructed. So here's the roster. They've almost got Cammy here as the face of the team, which is kind of interesting, the way they do this. Afro, JoeDeceives, and then of course Ghosty on the right hand side, and that will be kind of the big draw for many because Ghosty was a massive personality when he joined OpTic last season. There was lots of buzz around him and for a very good reason. That team when Ghosty joined, let's not forget really, Dashy, Shotzzy, Hook and Ghosty, not many OpTic fans were expecting that team to do that well, especially after all the drama with the Scump thing. They couldn't get pred. You know, Illy went after Boston. They came top 4 that event, and it was like getting this guy from Challengers. You know, okay, Parasite said he's good. Dashy and that talked to him, but, you know, is there really anything in this? And then Ghosty comes along, really reinvigorates that team in some respect, and they have great results relative to their expectations at the end of the season. I'm sure OpTic fans, having known that they were actually pretty damn good, would have liked them to have won something rather than getting the back-to-back seconds, but they won all those online series in a row, and then they fell short of the final 2 events. And we know that there was friction there between Dashy and Ghosty. It's not a secret at this point. It's been talked about from many different angles. And look, Ghosty can be, I think, a difficult personality to work with. You see that on his streams, but look, they've got JCap, they've got Shane, they've got these, you know, big personalities as well behind the scenes from a coaching perspective that I think can help Ghosty get the best version of himself out. But also I do wonder how it works from an AR perspective, because like you can say, oh, it's Dashy's fault that Ghosty clashed with him, or you can say it's Ghosty's fault that Dashy clashed with him, or you can say that they were both at fault to some degree for how things seemingly went off the rails a little bit at the end of the last season. But nonetheless, Ghosty is a very talented player, and I think it's definitely worth keeping in mind that Ghosty's ability in terms of slaying hard and putting on a show was not necessarily shown on OpTic. He did a fantastic job in challenges, especially at the Boston Open Challengers event back in February, where he was like the star player of that event, dropped like a 1.3, joined OpTic not to do that, right? He was to get in the hill, he was to do the communication, and even, you know, the likes of JP Krez gave him lots of gas, calling him, you know, human UAV, comparisons to formal. Now, he's no longer an OpTic for various reasons, and I think that any team that could get Ghosty would be happy to do so. Now, as I say, there are some concerns about potential friction and some other things with Ghosty, but I feel like he's definitely a player that's worth even that limited risk, because the upside is absolutely there. If he, you know, he can be the star player, he can be the slayer, or he can do a different role. Now, in fairness, we've only seen that on him one season on OpTic, and the likes of Hook, for example, on OpTic last year, looked way better when he was on OpTic than he did when he was on the Los Angeles Guerrillas, despite being the same player, just in 2 different systems. So you never really know if Ghosty's not going to look quite as good this year as he did last year, but all things considered, he should be a good signing. Now, Afro definitely falls into that category as well. I think that, you know, his performance this past season was underrated, really. Okay, yes, he only had a brief stint on Minnesota at the start of the season before they decided to make some moves, but during that period, he was very good. He plays in quite an interesting way, because I think in terms of raw talent and potential, he is, of the SMGs remaining on the market, he'd have been the one that I went for, right? Arguably the top 8 SMGs in the entire league are on the top 4 teams. So then you're looking for who's the SMG that could be a top 5 SMG if he really had a fantastic year. To me, that was Afro, and this was his performance on Minnesota. But even before that on London, I mean, at the start of Vanguard, he was phenomenal, and even at the end of Cold War, he was really good as well. So in the right system, Afro can be an absolute menace. He does play in an interesting way though, right? He's not quite a Simp or a Scump or a HyDra or a pred in some sense. He, you know, he can be aggressive, but often he does play a little bit, you know, he'll hide in a corner sometimes, he'll take his time a little bit. He's kind of an interesting, you know, his playstyle is a little bit difficult to put your finger on. So you do need an SMG around him that can do pretty much everything else if necessary. And that's why they've gone for JoeDeceives. Very interesting target to go for, because he was on Guerrillas last year. And look, again, he had statistically a pretty good year on Guerrillas. He actually had, I think he tied for the most aces of the season in Search and Destroy, which is a pretty good stat to get. And in fairness, if you take the fact that, well, Hook was on Guerrillas and was a good player, but on a terrible system, he didn't look so good. Maybe the same for JoeDeceives. They clearly see something in Joey D. Now, there's a good chance that maybe another Challengers player could have been a better fit. There were other options out there from the SMG side, but they clearly think JoeDeceives has a lot of upside, and I think that's arguable as well. He would have been the one player on that Guerrillas team last season that I would have expected to get a spot again, and that's exactly what has occurred. How's that going to work with Afro, though? I don't really know. Is JoeDeceives the best option in that role alongside Afro? Difficult to say. I think it might take a bit of time for them to find their feet together, but Afro typically has been pretty good at the start of titles, so yes, there will be some patience required here to make sure JoeDeceives is up to speed, but I think that they should really be targeting the start of the season to try and deliver some good results, because, you know, some of the top teams might start off slow, as Thieves themselves did, let's not forget, last season, and teams like Boston, I think they're going to have a longer kind of lead time before they get good. I think Boston will be good, but I think Thieves at the start of the year could give them a run for their money. So Ghosty, I have no doubts, given the situation, given the fact that they just don't have the budget to fund as those top teams still apparently do, we think think they're paying something like 120k a year or something, 120, 140, 100, something like that anyway. Like, it's not as much as they paid previously. They've had to cut salaries, and therefore they just can't afford to get the real, you know, best of the best players they've had for the last couple of seasons and the world champions. But of the players that aren't those guys, Ghosty, I would get. Afro, I would get for sure. JoeDeceives, I like the idea and the vision behind this. I'm not sure it's the best option. And then Cammy is, to me, where the questions are raised, because we've heard all this talk, right, from Parasite and others, that it's that Cammy syndrome, probably was the wrong way to say it, but Cammy, like, phenomenon, shall we say, that Parasite mentioned previously. A player that was really good a few years ago, hasn't really shown that since then, and can he get back to form? Maybe JCap and Shane, probably some of the best coaching partnership situations in the entire league, can get that out of Cammy. I'm sure he's going to have good, you know, rapport with Shane as well. And I'm confident they can do good things with Cammy this upcoming season. I guess the question is, like, who's going to be doing more of the slaying role? Is Ghosty going to take that on a little bit more? But if he is, usually he's the guy getting in the hill. So is it really more on Cammy to do more slaying? And also, like, you know, Cammy's a pretty big personality, as is Ghosty. If things don't go well, I can foresee some friction there in the Ghosty Cammy AR lineup. Now, maybe the coaches can manage that, but that's one of the concerns I do see. And Cammy Search and Destroy on paper was pretty woeful last season. And okay, when you look at it across the board, you look at Afro Search and Destroy, look at Joe Search and Destroy, look at Ghosties, they should be fine in that game mode, but that's still a little bit of a concern. So look, I mean, there were other options for this Thieves team. We talked earlier on about potentially getting aBeZy and Linz and maybe even Gwyn on the roster, or maybe building around aBeZy instead of Cammy. I think getting Ghosty was the right call. So, you know, I think both of those options were viable. And when you compare this team to the top 4 teams, it does, you know, flail around in comparison, right? Is this just a mid team for Los Angeles Thieves? Probably yes. But are they going to be the best of the rest, in a sense? These should be the top 4 teams. There will be events this season, I think, where these top 4 teams will be the 4 teams on Sunday. But it won't always be the case. Sometimes there'll be other teams that get to Sunday, depending on the way the bracket works, so they just turn up that weekend, or make it further to a top 3, even a grand finals. Of those 5 through 8 teams that have now been formed and pretty much been confirmed, I do think Thieves is actually the one that I'm most looking forward to seeing how it's going to fare, because, you know, Octane handing over the title of the Hill Kit and the Ghosty, and I mean, look, we look at a team like the Boston Breach. I like this roster quite a lot. Slasher, Priestahh, Capsidal, Snoopy, but I think this is going to take a bit of time. Snoopy's going to, I think, take some time to really learn his craft, and for Slasher and Priestahh to teach him what he needs to know. I think you've got to be patient with this Boston roster. Give them, you know, maybe 3-4 months, and by the time it gets to like Major 4, Major 5, that's when they can possibly be contenders. But I think there's, you know, it's not going to be coming out of the gates hot, that one. Minnesota, I'm not really particularly sold on. Same with the Miami Heretics. I think they've got upside, but, you know, it's not guaranteed they make champs or anything. And Seattle, I think, on paper is pretty dysfunctional with Arstees, Illy, aBeZy, and Hook on that roster of 4. So of all of those teams, not necessarily because Thieves have done a phenomenal job building their team, but mainly just because the other teams aren't particularly good, I don't think, in that range, mainly because all the top players have been signed by the top 4 teams. It's pretty much how it is. But I do think that if I had to pick a team at the start of the season to be like 5th best, or maybe make, you know, Championship Sunday, let's say, at the first event, I think Thieves might be that team. There are some concerns for me on the SMG line. There are some concerns as to whether Ghosty and Cammy's going to get on. I can definitely see a world where this team struggles early on, and after Major 2, Cammy's dropped and someone else comes in. I think that is a realistic possibility that you know, Cammy and the entire team will have to be aware of. It's not necessarily just Cammy. Maybe Cammy does great and someone else is gone. It's obviously difficult to predict these things. And obviously the other key point is the, let's say, the OpTic curse, right? Because the last few years, we have seen that players that have been dropped from OpTic have gone on to win champs in the upcoming season. Now, most of the players that got dropped from OpTic last year, including Rambo, are going Illy, Hook, Rambo to Seattle, we think. The other one is Ghosty. So if there's anything in this OpTic curse, it might have to be Thieves, because I don't imagine Seattle are going to win champs, at least with the roster they're forming. Maybe Thieves have a chance here with Ghosty, and I'm just looking forward to this whole Ghosty versus OpTic thing. We know that there was some friction there that went down at the end of the season. Seeing Ghosty up against OpTic again is going to be a good time, and I know that many OpTic fans have, you know, very much a soft spot for Ghosty for what he did for their roster last season. Wanted him to stay, let's be honest, but it's not happened. Kenny's coming in instead, and, you know, pretty good, right? Kenny goes from Thieves to OpTic, Ghosty goes from OpTic to Thieves. That's going to be a great matchup for the upcoming season. So that's pretty much where we're going to call it for today. Very much enjoyed to hear your perspective on this roster in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.